A local state rep defends that last-minute move by the General Assembly on the kneecap test. Welcome to My State of Mind. I am Dan York. It's a pleasure and honor every night to have you on board. Representative Gregg Amore from East Providence is here tonight. He put out an op-ed piece recently defending the General Assembly's not even 11th hour, after the 12th hour rip of the kneecap requirement for high school graduation. I thought it was one of the more egregious efforts the General Assembly has made in a long time. He vehemently disagrees, so we ought to have a hearty conversation about that. In the meantime, let's go to the rundown and let you know what I'm thinking about a whole bunch of stuff. Ho, ho, ho! Be careful what you ask for. This whole block and Fung routine is getting to be like this blah, 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 in the primary. We got to do that. I want a gubernatorial candidate to talk about that. The latest data inspires my thought. I'll show it to you. What else do we have here? That's the number for what? Stay tuned. That's Dick Cheney's thought. And oh, come on, you still got to hit the baseball, for crying out loud. I mean, it's not like Kevin could hit it. He's directing the Sox fan. We got a little, he and I have a little problem. All right, let's start the broadcast here. Oh, by the way, do I get a little hair problem tonight? Looks like Kev pointed out. Jess is like, well, you're on your own, Chubby. Sorry, there's just so much we're going to do with this broadcast. So if I'm a little off. Where's my makeup consultant? I don't have one. More listeners, more makeup consultants. Anyway, there's just so much you can do with this carcass. Let's go. A huge mistake. It would be. I'm a little loose tonight. A little punchy tonight. This could be a good one. ABC, a huge mistake. That's what it is. I was reading in Go Local Prov this morning this story. Anybody but CNC Group forming to take on Buddy. Okay, let me just say this for the record for everybody out there. For those of you who think that man is the worst thing that could ever happen to the city again, for those of you who think it is a step in the wrong direction back to the future, for those of you who think it's all about, oh my God, the reputation of the city, and the state will forevermore be damaged by his looking to become the mayor again. Look at me square in the eye, square in the camera, and let me tell you this. If you don't want Buddy Cianci to be the mayor, don't form this group. Repeat, if you don't want him to be the mayor, don't form this group. Do not formalize a PAC committee. Do not formalize funding. Do not formalize this effort, because what you will do, especially if he ends up in a one-on-one race with the Democratic winner of the primary because everybody else bails out, you will create a victim. A victim will be created, and Buddy Cianci will be a figure that people begin to feel sorry for. He will wisely play it to the nines, and he will be your mayor. You are warned on this date. What is today's date? July 16th of 2014. Remember what I told you come the general election. We'll roll this tape back. All right, next item. Block and Fung. Boring the living daylights at everybody now. It's getting to that point. Here's a headline. Rhode Island Public Radio had a debate with these guys, and maybe old Ian Donis had a moment of, I'm bored by these guys or whatever. But at the end of his debate on public radio, he asked this question of both Ken Block and Alan Fung, and then it caused a social media uproar because I guess Ken Block didn't name anybody. Listen.
What elected official in Rhode Island current elected official do you most admire, Ken Block, and why? Quickly.
I can't think of one.
How about you, Alan Fung?
I like a lot of our Republicans, particularly Representative Anthony Giarrusso is, fighting for a lot of small business owners because he comes from that. I think, on the GA side, he's, doing a lot of good things there.
Both answers are whatever. Admiration is a very high bar, feeling, thought process, right? That Ken Block couldn't pull one out in a hurry fashion is no mark against Ken Block. That Alan Fung pulled out a state rep's name out of nowhere, all due respect to Representative Giarrusso, is no heroic political moment either. The social media, Twitter about all of this, meaning there's nothing substantial right now being discussed between these two guys other than who's the better Republican and who respects Republicans more. Ken Block is renting the Republican primary. Everybody better get used to that right through the primary. And Alan Fung, I don't know. Alan, you're trying to be the best Republican, and while you do that, you'll just absolutely cook your goose for the general election. When it comes right down to it, these questions don't matter. And if you wonder why some pundits call this time of year the silly season, that's why they call it the silly season. Next item. Rebuild Rhode Island. This is a thought I had today as I looked at this White House report, which tells us that we have problems with our roads. Here's the data revised by Jess. She did some good edits, caught some of the numbers. These are the accurate numbers on the report from the White House. So she asserts 41% of roads in poor condition, 57 the bridges deficient or obsolete. By the way, just because they're deficient or obsolete doesn't mean they're going to fall down while you're driving over them. Unless this is not a bridge, is it? That's just potholes. We always bring up the typical B-roll for you, so that that's what we call it in the business. By the way, you see that little bridge? Does anybody got a lawnmower? Look, there's two things that we got going on here. We got an infrastructure that's decaying right in front of our very eyes, and we've got a dump of a highway system. It's so funny, we got these new signs. I got to go take a picture for the TV. You see them, Discover Beautiful Rhode Island. You come in at the entries to the state, and right under these signs will be like 12 feet of weeds. Exits coming off our major highways look like the Amazon. We have no money anymore to even mow the lawn or cut the grass. We've got potholes and bridges that are in problems all over the place. We got a new funding mechanism that may get toward it, but really what we need is another $40 million a year to just start to catch up on the stuff that we got to take care of. And in a budget of $8.5 billion, we ought to be able to find that. No gubernatorial candidate, Democrat or Republican, has actually addressed this thing as a big picture issue. And boy, would it resonate with you and me, right? So I think I'm looking for the candidate who can actually tell us how we will rebuild Rhode Island, which would improve our psychology, make us smile a little bit more. Because right now, if you don't clean your room or the kitchen, you start to get a little depressed. Well, guess what? Right now, our place looks pretty ratty, and it doesn't help our overall disposition. Now, does it? Next item. Yep, that's the number. Yeah, for a long time, people thought it was 10%. Washington Post headline, Health Survey gives the government its first real large-scale data on how many gay and bisexual folks we have. A lot of people walking around saying it's 10%. The number is 3. That's the new number. That's what we're going with. Interestingly enough, 1.1% said, I don't know. Or one of those two categories didn't fit. Now, when we had the director of the gay, lesbian, transgendered, bi, queer, questioning, she was like, there's a lot of definitions. So inside that 1.1%, people are freelancing, man. But the number's lower than some folks would tell you. Just thought I'd let you know. I have no commentary on it, just want to get the data straight. What else do we've got here today? Yeah, come on, Dick. What are you doing? The former vice president just can't help himself. The CNN.com headline, any attempt to impeach the Obama the administration here be a distraction. Good for him, because he's not joining Sarah Palin on the idea that the president needs to be impeached for things like what he's done with the border and Obamacare. But this is what Dick Cheney did say when asked about the Obama presidency. He said he's the worst of his lifetime. Jimmy Carter might have been a better president. That was awful hard for old Dick Cheney to get out of his mouth, because he's no big fan of Jimmy Carter. I don't know. I like it when our former vice president and president just kind of fade into the woodwork, offer some thoughts on smart things, but leave the ratings game alone. It's not good form, and Dick Cheney, somebody needs to tell him that. And finally, speaking of good form, Derek Jeter had it. He went 2 for 2 last night, but we got controversy in an all-star game. As you probably know, the American League won 6-3, and they will retain home field rights for the World Series. So if the Sox make a run, it'll be 4-3 at Fenway. Just got eyeballed over there. But Mr. Wainwright, the pitcher, told a reporter during the game that he kind of served a couple up, then he double-stepped back and forth, and it was handled pretty well by him and Derek Jeter at the end.
The comments you made to the reporters after you pitched, what was that all about? You know what? Sometimes my humor gets taken the wrong way. I feel terrible about this. If anyone's taken any credit away from what Derek Jeter has done today, or off me or anything, I mean, it was missaid. I made a mistake about that. I hope people realize I'm not intentionally giving up hits out there. I know this game means something.
He grooved them. The first one was a little cutter. He threw down and away. He probably assumed I was swinging, so he didn't groove the first one. Second one was about 98 two-seamer that stayed on really good. No, I don't know, man. I have no idea. If he grooved it, thank you. You still got to hit it, so I appreciate it if that's what he did. Thank you.
I think classy on both sides. By the way, that Nike commercial, respect. Was it Nike, Kev? Yeah, it's a Nike commercial. It was phenomenal. Even the two Boston guys at the bar, tipping the hat. All right, when we come back, State Representative Gregg Amore. He thinks what they did was great. Not so much for me. Stay tuned. By the way, it's Amore, not Amore. Strike another one for me. We're having one of those days. You'll meet the representative here in a second. Here's what the Ed Commissioner, Deborah Gitt, said about the last-minute decision by the General Assembly to eliminate the kneecap as a requirement for high school graduation this year after the kids had left school.
This didn't just happen while it may have felt very sudden. I mean, we've been dealing with this for months. I mean, people have been working very hard to get out a message that was frequently not correct about what we were doing, what the policy was. It was interesting because as we were leading up to that, to the end of the General Assembly session, I kept saying to people, like, now is not the time. We're at the 25.5 point marker in a marathon, and then we had crossed the finish line. And the year had gone through. It had been not easy, but definitely a success. And so it was disappointing.
Yeah, I think so too. Here's the headline on the op-ed piece written by Representative Amore. They did its job, and he was in the middle of that. Sorry for not having the accent on the right syllable there.
You can tell that you're not a native Rhode Islander.
Yeah. Well,
you would have had the.
Oh, okay. All right. Gloves are off now, right? Just passing by for 15 years. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you.
I appreciate being here.
We don't agree.
Nope.
I thought that was a stunt that the General Assembly pulled that sent all sorts of bad messages to the kids, upended what the Board of Education had done, made the Ed Commissioner look like a fool, and I don't think the ends justify the means or back and forth. So you tell me why it was a good move. You're a teacher, of course, an educator in East Providence as well,
Correct.
right?
25 years in the classroom.
You teach what?
I teach history.
Okay.
It's a bad policy. So the bottom line is the kneecap was first designed as a diagnostic tool. So it is supposed to guide instruction and curriculum. It shifted when the commissioner came to Rhode Island and she decided she was going to use it as a graduation requirement. It was never designed for that. In fact, when I first started administering the kneecap test, it never had any designation, proficient, non-proficient, nearly proficient, proficient with distinction. That didn't exist. That was added for us. None of the other states that use it use that. When it comes to math, the math kneecap test is not a subject-specific test. So depending on which district you're in, you may not get to the algebra that's on that test until after the test is given. Remember, this is an October test. So if you look at what you may take in the 9th or 10th grade, in one district it may be different than another district.
Now remember, for graduation requirement for the class of 2014, this test originally had been taken in October of the junior year, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But even still, that would be testing what you did in the 10th grade year and the 9th grade year. And the other problem with kneecap is
you've learned it.
You have, but there's something called summer learning loss, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And your children don't have that, because my guess is that in your house there are books, there's summer vacations, there's camps, those type of things. But usually there's about a 2.5 month summer learning loss for kids who are at risk, kids who live in the at-risk districts. So October's a bad time to have the test to begin with. There are a number
then they could take it again, and they had options to do that.
Sure. And again, it's not a subject-specific test. If you look at the Rhode Island's scores on the reading compared to the math, there's clearly a problem. Now, whether that problem is curriculum, the design of the test, I'm not sure. But even still, to make that a graduation requirement when the curriculum may have been flawed for 12 years is a problem. And so that holds students accountable for things that they weren't responsible for. like curriculum development.
Yet many of
Not
them,
to mention the fact that it's not designed for that. It's like
Yeah.
it's a square
Yeah,
peg in a round hole.
well,
Massachusetts has one that's designed for it. So does New York.
And I know that they're moving to another test. Well,
the
now
park.
it's going to be 2017 before we actually have a requirement for graduation.
Well, a testing requirement. We have requirements.
But here's the thing. I mean, there's a process conversation here as well. I mean, you're on the inside, and I respect your perspective on all of this as an educator for all those years. How can I not respect your point of view? But for crying out loud, we got a Board of Education that went through these hearings, and the same arguments were made ad nauseum. The General Assembly now steps in, and at the late stage of the game, thinks it's like some kind of saving hero. What message was that to our kids who had requirements to step up, however difficult that may be, and now all of a sudden, boom, that requirement was taken right out at the last second?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever too late to adjust a bad policy. I don't accept that. And remember,
You think it's a bad policy.
yeah, well, I know it's a bad policy. It has no. There's no.
You
there's no,
know it's a bad policy.
because
there are other
because
educators who think it was a terrific policy.
There
It was
are
setting a
educated-
standard.
There are administrators that think it's a good policy. I haven't met too many people in the trenches in the classroom that think it was a good policy because they've met and dealt with kids who are high school graduates but haven't met this criteria on this test. We have students at East Providence High School who've already figured it out, and now the policy changed. They said, listen, we'll just tank the first test next year because we show improvement and we're all set. I mean, this is incredibly flawed policy on so many levels, and it took a while to do it. And the policy's changed now. I don't think it diminishes the graduation requirements because we have a proficiency-based graduation requirement system that's very good, that was implemented in the early 2000s. That's very good. The testing is a part of it. Now, if we want to do what Massachusetts did and implement a graduation-specific test, then let's do that. But let's do what Massachusetts did. 20 years in the funding formula, huge support, huge interventions. Let's do it the right way. Create a test that actually is aligned with curriculum.
A lot of the arguments and complaints are the same between Massachusetts and Rhode Island, no matter what the difference in the actual test. When we come back, some more on this. Stay with us.
How do you prepare to take a math test?
You study.
Math. So how is it that we get into this situation where we say we're going to test prep
Right.
and pretend as if that's not
Like, you either
teaching
get
kids
the math or you don't get the math.
The primary thing you need to know is the content that's on the test. Now, unfortunately, in some schools and school districts, they think that the way to prepare students for an assessment is to practice tests. It's still math, but they think that as long as you
Sample
just do
test,
lots
sample
of
test,
problems,
sample
lots of problems, that's not the right way to prepare them.
All right, so that question for the commissioner a couple of weeks back, Representative Amore, was actually in reaction to some notes that you gave me
Sure.
about this slowdown in true educational process that I was hearing happened in the school systems because there was just a neurotic need to get these kids test ready.
So remediation.
Your reaction to her discussion is what?
Right. So we heard from Dr. Lucy, who told
The
us,
superintendent of the province.
correct, who told us that there were a number of students being pulled from regular education classes, whatever they might be, history, science, art, I don't know, that were being pulled from those classes for math remediation so that they could reach that score on the kneecap. In my own school, we have students taking double block maths to prepare for the kneecap test. Now, how does that affect a kid's education? A kid might want to go into the Career and Tech Center and take auto body repair and actually use practical math skills, figure out the surface, the paint. That kid's denied access to that Career and Tech Center because their schedule's blocked up with a double math. And so I had an AP student who was pulled from my advanced placement class, who passed the class for math remediation. That's when you don't have the resources to remediate the correct way, Saturdays, after school, whenever it might be, then that's what you're going to do.
Wow,
for a test.
You read my mind. I mean, you know what? In the old days, people busted their tails and worked extra hard in order to be able to remediate themselves and didn't have to leave classes. So what are we doing? Just babying our kids, saying, okay, everything's got to happen between 7:30 and 2:30. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with your premise. The reality, though, is that in many cases, the education of Many of our children, that's it, 7:30 and 2:30. They're not getting anything at home. They're not doing what
Well,
they
you know
what
what?
they have to do
So
at
I
home.
think this testing exercise has brought to bear some things that need to be addressed, including but not limited to, how much we expect from our kids and how much are we going to demand in terms of them improving. And then there's just the message: what if Deb if she leaves or gets popped? And I think it's probably a good chance either one of those two things could happen based on the turbulence of the year. Now the message to the next ed commissioner who comes in from anywhere is that the General Assembly in the last hour or after the last hour could usurp everything that he, and the Board of Education have done. Your answer to that is?
Well, of course, legally they can. They don't want to do that. And I think if the department heads and the department are responsive to the situation that exists, I don't think that would have to happen. I think Rhode was unresponsive to what was going on the ground. I think where the commissioner and members of Rhode are, they don't witness what goes on in the schools. They don't see the time spent on the remediation for an additional correct question. And you can't tell me that a kid who's a 3 or a 4 on the kneecap reading can't succeed in college because they're a 2 or not quite a 2 on the kneecap math. I just don't buy that. I don't think that makes any sense. We need a holistic approach to a graduation requirement. And this should be a piece, but if this, and you asked the commissioner that on that segment, if this piece holds you back, there's a problem. And she says, well, one thing won't hold you back, but this will hold you back. And because it holds you back, we waste all of this time and effort remediating for one piece of one test. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense.
I do think that there was a lot of confusion as to waivers. I think there was inequity between the districts in terms of waivers.
There was.
And the whole thing. Messy as it was, we'll have to agree or disagree that it was the right thing for the General Assembly to do. But you're no doubt a smart guy on education, so come back a lot and let's talk more about it. And it's going to be, hey man, it's going to be on you.
Yeah, thank you.
You better write a new program.
It's on me. Thanks.
I'll see the bill as soon as we reconvene.
Thank you very much.
Representative Gregg Amore, your state of mind. We'll come back to it. I appreciate the representative having that discourse with me. He seems like a smart guy in education. We just disagree. If you agree or disagree, you just tell me. 228-1886 and email and Facebook post and tweet at me. A little bit out of time here this evening because of the length of that conversation, but I'll hear what you have to say for tomorrow night when we reconvene. We'll see you at noon on WPRO tomorrow and 7:30 tomorrow night. See you. Good night.